And as we've gone through step by step, examining these initiatives more carefully, we found that, of course, they're absolutely chock-a-block with strategic content. Indeed, the notion that these are benign commercial development projects is luckily been largely debunked. And we're dealing with a very ambitious and sometimes insidious set of efforts. We took it upon ourselves to try to look at this in a more granular fashion. And about 7 years ago, our firm, and I'm representing the Prague Security Studies Institute today. RWR is more of an impartial data provider. But that said, we took it upon ourselves to try to track every Chinese transaction outside of China globally on a daily basis. And that data now goes back some 6 years. These are not just being tracked, but they're being visually mapped. And so this is what, this is the, I'm sorry, we are a little bit out of order here, so if I might, I'll see if I can. Yeah, this is China's global footprint as it exists today, and I mean up to the date. So it gives you just a quick visual image of where those, the intensity of those dots are located. I don't think there's a surprise, much of a surprise to anyone there. We also try to organize the data in a manner that illuminates specific security-related challenges. If I can go back, for example, we were the first company some 4 or 5 years ago to identify every Chinese state-owned enterprise doing business in the South China Sea, in the building of the illegal islands and militarizing them. And when you look at not parent companies, but their networks of subsidiaries, and take it, you blow out that global footprint of where they are around the world, this is what you come up with. So as you can see, these companies are well known, they have large global footprints, and yet, to my knowledge, there's never been one sanctioned by the United States to date. As dangerous a circumstance as this is. As you know, that water weighs $5 trillion a year in trade, and yet so far China's walked without any major penalty. Here's what a global footprint of Huawei looks like. We do this in both city views as well as country views. These are colors are the regions of the world. The number of transactions in various countries dictates the size of those bubbles. China Communications Construction Company. This is the largest Chinese entity in Belt and Road. So its footprint is particularly important. They are the dredging company that helped build the islands. And there's a lot of stories about this. They tried to go to the Hong Kong Stock Exchange for an IPO on $1 billion, and luckily we played a role in trying to interdict that deal by the very fact that they were unwilling to disclose their activities in the South China Sea as being controversial and worthy of material risk consideration in the prospectuses. Why? Because, of course, these are illegal activities. They're sanctionable. There's legislation for Marco Rubio and others that's pending right now that could sanction. And yet, CCCC, when they were confronted by the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, demurred and said, no, this is the same as Exxon drilling off of New Jersey. There's no controversy here. We're not going to register this as a risk. And finally, with the threat of class action lawsuit, Hong Kong Stock Exchange insisted, and they withdrew the IPO and that $1 billion rather than to have to admit or disclose the fact that they were engaged in disputed, controversial activities. This is important because it gets down to how we're going to help resolve this issue, not just through sanctions, but market principles. I mean, what about disclosure, transparency, proper risk management, good corporate governance, protecting of share value and corporate reputation? These are all market principles and tools that we can effectively use to hold Chinese entities accountable as they don't come in but pour in to our debt and equity markets, which is I'm going to be getting to shortly. So this is just the country view of CCCC. I thought it was timely to just take a quick glance of China and Iran. You know, my guess is China has no intention of curtailing its business activities in Iran and its deliveries of oil. It's the largest taker of Iranian oil. I think it's as much as half of their production. So they've made pretty plain that they're not going anywhere. So we're looking at every Chinese company in Iran, all of their subsidiaries, mapping their global footprints, because in the event that the Trump administration should decide to actually do something, namely follow through on its threat of secondary sanctions. You know, where are these companies doing business? What leverage do we have? How many of them are doing business in American cities? How many are listed on the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ or trading over the counter in our markets? I mean, these are going to be relevant questions. This is 21st century warfighting. This, in my judgment, is the sixth domain of American warfighting, namely the economic and financial warfighting domain. Look at it. Look for it coming to a neighborhood near you. We've got air, land, space. We have air, land, sea, cyber, space. But where is the area of our single greatest dominance? The economic and financial domain. They're in our sandbox. We're not in theirs. And yet, we haven't exercised a fingernail of our leverage to curtail their predations and their hostile activities directed toward the United States. So that's just a quick look at Intel Track, and there's more to say on that in the way we slice and dice that data. Now, going back quickly, because time is an issue here, to the cap markets, China has about over 650 companies in our debt and equity markets today. Maybe around 86 in the New York Stock Exchange, 62 in NASDAQ, well over 500 in the over-the-counter markets. Why? Because, of course, they're less regulated. And you can bet that they're shopping for as little transparency, as little disclosure as they can possibly attain. Now, the alarming part of this is that the pace, the sheer pace of the money we're talking about now, we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars, moving rapidly toward $1 trillion. So we're not talking about a few tens of billions here. We're talking about hundreds of billions. Now, it raises a question. Given the fact that the United States has never put up any kind of security-minded screening mechanism over our cap markets, like we have with CFIUS and FIRMA in the trade portfolio, where at least we're making an effort to vet Chinese investment in the United States to find out who these people are, what are their true intentions, do we have a national security threat there that's worthy? Nothing like that's happening vis-a-vis the cap markets, never has, and that's the root of the problem. So in trying to summarize, and we can perhaps return to some of this in the Q's and A's, there are two major new material risk categories that should properly be focused on. One is national security related risk, and the second is human rights related risk and the abuses there. And I'm thinking about such activities as Hike Vision and its surveillance cameras and equipment that is permeating the detention camps. Some would say the concentration camps are holding a million Uyghurs today. When you look at the indexes, like the MSCI Emerging Market Index, it's tracked by $2 trillion of funds under management. It's mimicked by 14 trillion more. Every time they add a Chinese company, and they're doubling the number in the next 12 months, as much as $14, $16 trillion automatically buy those. Now, you know, some of these companies are major national security and human rights abuse. Take, as I say, Hike Vision on the human rights side, China Unicom, AVIC, China Shipbuilding. In other words, when you look at these companies, and I wanted to describe some of what they do, but I'm already getting the sign here from Frank, which I know him too well, which is get out now. That said, perhaps we can return to who these folks are. But let me assure you that those profiles are very troubling. I mean, these are very risky entities on the part of those who look at risk, and they are bad actors in the eyes of those who care about national security and human rights. So I will leave you with there at this time, but leave it to say that we have a real opportunity here if we're prepared to mobilize. Remember, this is your money. All of us are in the markets. I don't know how many millions, hundreds of millions of Americans, 180, 200 million Americans have portfolios. We've looked at the public pension systems. We've looked at the mutual funds, the index funds, and so forth. It's not pretty. So wittingly or unwittingly, you're holding bad actors in portfolio. So I'll just leave you with the notion that we all have a right and a responsibility to take action here and call for the kind of disclosure that we need to know as prospective investors. I mean, that's the very least that can be done. And that's not a huge claim. I mean, that's not a huge ask, after all. We're not talking sanctions and market restrictions and trying to damage the competitiveness of our exchanges and all that Wall Street's going to come after us with as they fearmonger you away from this topic. We're looking at disclosure, transparency, market principles, and if we stick with that, it's a very strong suit. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Roger. I should have noted for this audience in particular that in a previous incarnation, Roger was a vice president and special assistant to the chairman of the board of a company here in town. So I recall Chase Manhattan Bank before he went into the administration of Ronald Reagan. Thank you. The unenviable task I have is trying to truncate a whole series of presentations that I would love to have go much longer, as I know would you. But we will have some time, if we're disciplined, to actually engage in a bit of Q&A. Next up, I'm very pleased to have a friend and colleague of many years as well, Gordon Chang. Gordon is well known, I'm sure, to this audience and many others besides, from his myriad appearances as one of the country's real duty experts on Asia, specifically on China, as the author of 3 terrific books, The Coming Collapse of China being particularly relevant, also Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World, and most recently, Losing South Korea. He's a contributor to the Daily Beast, and I'm pleased to say to my radio program, Secure Freedom Radio, each week. Gordon Chang, where are you? Come forth. Thank you very much. He's going to talk about... We've asked Gordon to talk a little bit about unrestricted warfare, a term that's in the title of this program, and specifically how it applies in the economic battle space, notably in the Belt and Road Initiative. Thank you. Gordon.
The Committee on the Present Danger, China, is the first line of defense of our free society and free societies everywhere. It is truly an honor for me to be here today, so thank you so much, Frank. As Frank mentioned, China is conducting unrestricted warfare against the United States, and this challenge is multifaceted. It is military, diplomatic, technological, it is ideological, and it's political. But there's also one other aspect that Roger just mentioned. When the Belt and Road Initiative was first announced in 2013 to connect the great cities of China's coast to Europe and the points in between, this was limited to those routes. But subsequently, it's been broadened to the rest of the world. So we do know that China's challenge is global, And that global challenge is economic. And as Roger mentioned, the struggle is going to be determined, I believe, by the country which has the stronger economy. After all, the Soviet Union gained adherence when its economy looked strong, and it lost the Cold War when it was apparent it could not keep up. This is the way the world is. It's unfortunate, but unfortunately, that's where we are. And we're seeing the same dynamic.
但是目前呢，就是中国觉得人们觉得中国现在越来越，就因为经济吧，使它就是这种侵犯越来越强烈，越来越强大。就是好像目前看起来，中国的经济越来越强大，其他的西方国家还有美国日益就是有点衰落。
Is on the line in the trade talks between the United States and China. This is our opportunity to define our future, and this is an opportunity for us to not miss in China.
就是现在我们就是这个超限战，现在应该就是对付他们的时候了，就是不要让他们在这个在中国在这个经济啊各个方面统治这个事情。
We also saved communism in China in 1989 after the Tiananmen Massacre. Bush 41 did that, and he didn't have a good reason to 30 years ago. By the way, we mark that anniversary this June. President Clinton didn't have a reason to do that in 1999 when he inked the agreement with Beijing.
他就讲天安门事件之后呢，就是改革开放以后呢，美国没有特别好的这个理由啊，就是就是后来不是布什总统都没有进行任何对中国的这个经济进行任何动作。不是中国去年的那个国民经济总值是6.6%，但是明显的是不会那么高。就是中国2018年实际上增长不是没有超过1.6%，好像。这是他们美国的统计的数据。把这个谁的音给关一下。5.5 times faster than the production of nominal GDP. That's up from a pace of 1.5 times just a year ago. So this is not sustainable. What is sustainable for China is signing a trade deal with the United States. So I say, let's not sign. 他就讲说这个中美贸易，他说现在这个经济增长是不实际的，就是中国应该跟美国签一个贸易协定。就是现在跟中国签订这个贸易协定其实是不现实的，因为为什么我们要再跟他？就以前这些贸易协定都不现实，都没有实行，为什么现在我们还跟北京谈判呢？还签一个合同有什么意义呢？如果我们现在签了，就表明就是中国这些就是美国的这些公司啊，就更进一步的跟中国政府的这些经济被陷进去了。有史以来吧，就是很多就是美国公司。美国政府跟他签的贸易协定呢，就是中国政府习近平吧，并不履行这些合同。就现在我们就是以前这些合同都没有实行，为什么现在再签也没什么意义？
就是习近平不认可国外的这些经济的这些合作计划和规范规矩。如果他们不承认、不遵循这些、不遵守这些，我们还有什么理由跟这些人签任何合同呢？而且他们这很多政府啊，就是绑架呀，伤害这些美国公民啊，美国的这些官员。
Admiral said that China should use its Dongfeng 21D and Dongfeng 26 missiles to sink 2 aircraft carriers.
就是美国的，就中国最近有2个就是导弹，就是袭击了美国的海军啊。这个非常强势的这些中国官员啊，军队官员的这些态度，说为什么这就是另外一个原因，为什么我们要跟他们签？他就讲说，他从来不遵循一些贸易合同，在政治上也不认可西方的经济制度，在军事上又在打击，就是袭击美国的这些军舰呀、舰队，就在这些基础上，为什么我们还要跟他合作签任何合同？再加上以前他们根本没有遵守任何签的合同。
First of all, I think that President Trump should cancel the tariff increase reprieve that he granted in February. I also think that we should increase the tariffs beyond that 25%, and we should ban the importation of goods into the United States that have benefited from the theft of U.S. intellectual property.
他说我不同意川普在以前决定，就说给中国加关税什么。他说我们就应该全面禁止中国的这些到中国。有些人认为我们不能，他的意思就是说加关税没意义，还不如就全面禁止中国产品进入美国。
Surplus, 129.6%. So China's overwhelming dependence on the U.S. gives President Trump extraordinary leverage over the Chinese. Now, most everyone believes that the United States and China cannot separate their economies. But Chinese leaders aren't concerned about it.
就是中国其实非常依赖美国市场，他们不管怎么说，虽然再高关税，他们也能承担，也就对他们没有什么影响。但是实际上，他非常美国市场，依赖美国市场，你再加关税对意义不大，他还是要出口。他说就跟他完全不合作，他对伤害美国当然会了。对，但是中国每年就窃取上亿元的这个经济产权。我们的这个在知识产权被窃取的那一些利益呢，绝对比这些从中国进口产品大，但是我们被他偷的太多了。他就讲说就是这个知识产权这方面窃取啊，和这个从中国进口产品相比啊，损失现在目前来讲，在这方面美国的损失更大。他说他希望呢，就是说美国应该跟中国，他的建议就是说美国跟中国彻底不合作，就不让他进口。这样的话呢，他说现在我们不能再拯救中国的经济了，因为这样是无限期的会拖延下去。
Thank you very much for very important messages on several fronts. I did want to just say that the senior military officers that he mentioned who were calling for attacks on American carrier battle groups may not be expressing the party line, as it were, but they haven't been demoted or, removed from service either, which is a message to everybody. Next up, I'm very pleased to say we have one of your own here in the New York financial sector, Kyle Bass, who
下面是 Kyle Bass， 就是那个郭先生那个 Rule of Law 的那个主席。
He is, of course, Chief Financial Investment Officer of Heyman Capital Management. He is also the author of a new piece.
这个是郭先生法治基金的那个主席凯尔贝斯的，马上要讲话。他是想讲一讲现在在香港这些大家的这些不安动荡的状况。
It's an honor to be here, and an honor to be here with guys like Gordon and Roger. I took a couple of notes. I needed my pom-poms there. Those were great speeches. But I think from the perspective, if you don't mind, I'll start by commenting real quickly on what Roger said. You know, when you look at China's economy, they purport to have an economy that's 15% of global GDP. When you look at cross-border currency settlement, they don't even represent 1%.
可是你如果看中国15%，世界上所有经济它占15%，但是它这个边境之间的这个金融经济就是现金的这个交换呢，不到1%。中国现在非常缺美元，就是中国现在印了它大多的人民币，但是它非常缺美元。中国可以控制他们自己境内经济，但是他们不能够控制就是海外呀和各种各样海外的经济。他们在香港呢，就是去赚美金，用香港去换取美金。
Chinese corporate borrowing in dollars has already eclipsed $1 trillion last year. It's gone to about 1.1 trillion. And the inclusion of the MSCI, as you saw the articles in the Wall Street Journal, saying that China pressured MSCI with all the pressure they could put on them to get their representative weightings increased, which is happening now. They're actually
中国现在在国际市场上借了很多美元，大概有1万 trillion。
U.S. retirees that index to these things. All of our money is going into companies that actually don't have Big Four auditors. They actually don't allow audits.
他们在美国市场、西方市场就是去在这个市场上去借呀，或者是融资美金，但是他的那些大的上市公司呢，中国那些上市公司拿来的钱呢，其实他们这些公司呢根本就不透明，没有那种就去检查这些公司到底是什么来头。
Do business with the Iranian National Oil Company, the Iranian National Shipping Company, and everyone that's listed in the primary sanctions are secondarily sanctionable. And that is up to the United States government to go ahead and sanction those secondary entities. But you think about one thing that we can do, I think, with this organization, I think we can also, let's say, issue edicts as far as what the U.S. can do as action items. And one thing we can do is all pensions and endowments run under an IRS exemption, a tax exemption. And so if the IRS issued guidance that said you're not allowed to invest in primary sanction entities, period, it's against the law. And if an entity is secondarily sanctionable, or what we deem to be secondary sanctionable, continuing to do business with primary sanction companies, we should just make them, we should force divestment. If you want to keep your tax exemption, you're not allowed to invest in these.
他讲说美国政府现在可以怎么做呢？就是对这个美国的上市公司哈，他说美国政府可以做的就是像那些有那个美国政府给那些好像退休啊基金的这些美国这些，他们有很多的这个投资嘛，就让这些公司去迫使这些公司不要在中国这些上市公司去投资，不买中国的这些债券呀或者股市。其实他就想就是说断掉那个中国这些在美国上市公司的这些的财路吧。美国这些退休养老基金有很多钱都投在股票市场上，他就想说，美国政府可以控制这个。
It's interesting. That's a pretty big number, right? I've never seen one public company file an 8K showing evidence of IP theft, and there's 200 to 300 billion of it a year. So I think we should force public companies to go complain to the government to file 8Ks.
现在很多就是美国的这些上市公司应该去政府那儿去投诉他们所有的这些知识产权被盗取。现在这是另外一件事应该做。香港是中国就是买到美元的一个地方，一个基地。
U.S. Policy Act that Mitch McConnell led in the Senate. It got signed. And basically, we treat Hong Kong as its own sovereign, even though China technically controls Hong Kong. As long as Hong Kong maintains its democratic electoral process, its autonomy in its economy, and its autonomy in its judiciary, we treat them as their own nation, and we have a free trade agreement with them. They're our most favored nation.
说现在香港虽然是在中国的这个政府统治下，但是在表面上呢，它有自己相对独立的经济体制。如果他说，如果是香港要真正意义上能保持相对独立，那是问题是不大。但是香港现在目前的经济状况非常差。香港现在经济非常非常差。
Hong Kong used to be the southern port for China. This is a ratio of Hong Kong.
香港曾经是中国南方的最大的一个港口，到了现在呢，这是曾经在90年代初香港的这个经济已经。
Spend all the money they've spent building out their own southern port infrastructure and their trade infrastructure, Hong Kong's become much relevant, but still very financially relevant to China. It's really important to see how Hong Kong's economy has changed.
就是现在香港整个就是这个经济状况在90年代中期以后就下降了好多。红色的是就是服务业。蓝色是产品业。
And they're a services exporter, and they export to China, right? Hong Kong faces China for about 80% of their GDP. What's happened in Hong Kong in the last 10 years is something that will never happen again. So since they're pegged to our currency, the US dollar, they import our rates. So when our rates went to zero in 2008, their largest trading partner went to the gas pedal, China. So what happened to Hong Kong real estate from 2008 to today is the largest real estate increase.
就是香港从2008年以后它的那个房地产一直增加，就全世界就在创纪录，在房地产升值就是基本上是随便要什么钱有什么钱，有10年。
Household leverage when you get private sector credit to GDP in Hong Kong is now the highest in the world.
就现在这个私人借款和它这个国民生产值是指香港差距特别大，就是借钱比这个实际它的国民产值相比较差距特别大。
Those dominoes fell in the order of the size of their banking system. Hong Kong's banking system is now as large as they were then. With another fun fact, the two largest banks in Hong Kong, HSBC and Standard Chartered, are orphan children of British financial institutions that don't have any British depositors. So I think those
就是现在中国就是香港两个最大的，因为它根本没有什么存款户。
You import our rates, and then to defend that peg, you have to have what we call excess reserves. Now this is a busy chart, but let me just put it in perspective. In the last year, Hong Kong has spent 80% of its rainy day fund defending this peg to the U.S. And the only reason pegs work is you have synchronicity in economies. Well, now Hong Kong's economy is much more relevant China's economy is much more relevant to Hong Kong than the U.S. And they're spending a lot of their rainy day funds trying to maintain.
现在香港花了它80%的那种就是外汇储存和它的这个就是 对付应急方面的这种存储吧，他花了他80%的，他就是现在中国经济对香港的影响啊，比这个美国对它影响特别大。虽然说这个香港的这个外汇市场和这个是可以在这个美金啊，它是一种对等就是一种特殊的一种关系，但是目前呢，它就是相反的越来越依赖中国市场。它现在香港就基本上那些外汇储蓄基本上已经花光了80%。如果你现在有港币呀，如果你有港币，你就麻烦了。
So, if you've noticed in the last month or so, China has actually floated a proposal through Hong Kong's legislature that says they would just like to extrajudicially grab people off the street of Hong Kong if China deems them to be a quote fugitive. And if fugitive means that happens to be a law in China and Hong Kong. Let's just use murder for example. If President Xi issues a warrant of arrest and calls the Hong Kong police and says, hey, this person XYZ committed murder in China and he's there in Hong Kong, we want you to ship him over to us.
他是讲政治问题哈，就是中国可以现在随便从香港引渡他的一些罪犯呀。他说这个现在香港已经不是独立的了，他自己已经不是所谓独立的一个政体了，他现在就是。中国政府可以随便引渡在香港任何的一个罪犯呀，这个已经达成了一个协议。现在在讲政治方面，就是可以随便从香港引渡这些罪犯到中国，现在马上就这个法律马上就要被通过了。所以现在到了川普总统那儿就去讲啊，说如何对待香港这个就是独立的这么一个经济地区。以前它是因为是相对独立，所以它跟美元挂钩啊，很多贸易的这些合作呀，都是因为它是独立相对独立的，跟中国政府相对独立，经济政治独立的。如果现在这个随便能够引渡政治犯去中国，而且在经济上他这么依靠中国市场，那美国政府呢就应该考虑他现在还是不是应该认可香港是独立的。这样的话呢，就是其实美国他也认为美国不应该跟中国签订任何贸易协定。就在过去36年、过去几十年，把中国相对来讲经济还是比较稳定的，但是现在已经不是这种状态。这家伙说话真快。
Next, to pick up on some of these same points and expand on them, particularly I'm hoping with respect to the Belt and Road Initiative and the technology piece of what China's up to and what we need to be doing about it. I'm very pleased to introduce David Goldman, again, I think someone you all are very familiar with, the author of a terrific column at Asia Times, although it's under his nom de plume.
这个是一个《亚洲时报》的作者。
And very active in the markets in MicroStrategy LLC, which he is, I believe, one of the directors, managing director. Come on up, David Goldman. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be here. This is the blood, sweat, and tears version of what you just heard. I know.
特别刚才你们听到的比较耸人听闻啊。
Churchillian in its feeling, and by Churchillian I mean specific. I refer to Andrew Roberts' discussion of Churchill's view of Asia right after Pearl Harbor, and I quote from his wonderful new biography. Churchill said, "In the event of war, the Japanese would fold up like the Italians because they were the wops of the Far East." End of quote. Of course, then we had Singapore, which is the biggest disaster for British arms in all of history. And I believe if we underestimate the Chinese, as Westerners so often underestimate Asians, we're going to have a Singapore as well. I think the situation is a good deal more difficult. Think of the Russians at Port Arthur, the Americans at Pearl Harbor, the Yalu River, British at Singapore, and so forth. I don't believe that China's economy is in nearly as bad shape as Gordon and
他认为中国的经济吧，不像刚才这两位讲的这么。
There are dozens of firms who look at satellite photographs, count the number of trucks in parking lots of Chinese factories, interview people on the ground, and so forth. I look at these every day.
他说他每天都看这些卫星啊，关于这个中国这些生产的呀、汽车呀、卡车呀、运货呀，就是这方面的这个信息呀。
Follows a nice gentle trend upwards. You had a huge spike because of the Lunar New Year. There's no bubble in credit growth in China. It's actually quite normal, and they appear to have cut it back. Now, recall that January 6th, President Trump said China's not doing very well, puts us in a strong position. We are doing very, very well. Since then, China's stock market has gained 37% 2019 to date.
就是2019年，中国那个股票市场涨了3.7%、3.9%。
One of the main reasons that this growth has declined is that capex is way under anyone's forecast, and the main reason capex is down, according to David Wood, Bank of America, a number of other analysts, is because since no one knows where global supply chains are going to end up, no one is making outlay decisions. So it's quite possible that the trade war has damaged short-term U.S. economic growth more than it's damaged Chinese growth. I support President Trump. I applaud him for calling China out. But I don't think the tools that he's using will get the results.
他说现在川普啊，把中国给点出来了，拿出来了，就是但是现在这个他的这个，现在这个川普现在采取的这个行为呢，他在评价他这个行为。
Substitutes. Huawei ran a crash program. As of December 2018, they were self-sufficient. In other words, an export ban would have no effect on their business except to raise their cost a bit. And a Japanese study just published by Nikkei reports that Huawei's handset chips are now equal or better than Apple's.
他现在讲说，就是根据一个日本的一个 Nikkei 调查，就是现在华为的手机的市场跟苹果是一样的。他认为就是华为之战呀，是现在这个美国的这一个就是这个状况现在非常的不好。
South Koreans, Indians, and a dozen others, Poles, Czechs, Hungarians, have told us no, thank you very much. Well, we're going to use Huawei equipment.
现在虽然美国就是一直在打压华为，不让用华为，但是很多其他国家呀，包括英国，还是要想可能继续要用华为。
Huawei spent $72 billion in R&D in the last 6 years.
华为在过去的6年花了大概是100亿吧，600多亿啊，在做那个研发。
So that didn't work out too well for us. To paraphrase Leon Trotsky, you may not be interested in industrial policy, but industrial policy is interested in you. How did all of this happen? The Asian model means treating capital-intensive industry as a public good. In other words, a chip foundry or a steel mill will be subsidized by low-interest credit or some other means.
他说现在这个问题啊，就在亚洲，在中国呀，它是那个它这些工业，包括华为啊这些，它是全部政府资助。
The difference is they're 1.5 billion Chinese, and the impact of the Asian model on a country that big on the world economy is enormous. So the result is that all the elements of the modern digital economy, integrated circuits, laser-powered optical networks, sensors, displays, which were developed in the United States, every one of them, most of them with support from the Defense Department and NASA, are now produced overseas. America's shipments of semiconductors were 25% of the world total in 2011 and 10% in 2018. Will probably be down to 2% in the next 5 years as the Chinese massively raise the Taiwanese leap ahead of Asia.
他讲说，现在其实美国现在实际上问题是什么呢？很多研发是在美国做成的，但是这个实际上生产呢都是在亚洲国家，大部分都是在什么台湾呀、中国呀、日本、韩国，这个是一个主要问题。
President Trump just signed a bill into law in December authorizing $1.2 billion for quantum computing research in the next 5 years. So, what is the point of the Belt and Road Initiative in this case? China has a demographic problem long term. We studied this in the Department of Defense a few years ago. The point of Belt and Road, above all, is to lock into the Chinese system 2 countries with a population of 2 billion people to give China control of all the potential surplus of labor.
他说现在这一带一路的实质啊，就是中国想用这个，就是用这一带一路呢，把它这个人的这个人就是过剩的人力呀、往外输出。
Let us in. You'll be like China. We'll make you as little China. First you'll get telecommunications. Then we'll bring in Alibaba. You'll get e-commerce.
他说现在就是一种人力的输出，就过剩人力呀、和物力的这种输出向外，就让全世界都变成阿里巴巴，变成华为，就是这种。
Are now getting text messages from Japanese food processing companies owned by Alibaba telling them
说现在好像比如泰国农民哈、能够接到那个阿里巴巴的短信，让他们就是一种全球性的这种中国把就是全世界很多地方的这种经济体制吧引到这种，就是把中国的这种经济体制全球化。
Forget about the rest of the world. This is on our borders. So this would have gone much further if the Chinese hadn't been rapacious, incompetent, greedy, and corrupt in many of their dealings.
还有就是一个问题，就是中国在这一带一路这种过程，这种经济就是合同协作过程中有很多这种腐败的现象，这也是另外一个大的问题。就是这一带一路呢，它不光是输出它这过剩的这个人力呀、和物力，它也把它的系统，把它的就这个体制带到了全国各地。比如说墨西哥也在用它的这个产品，就已经到了美国的边境。
Not to control our own semiconductor industry is like being a European power in the 19th century. That doesn't produce steel for cannons. Secondly, we need to create our own Belt and Road.
他就讲哈，说现在其实就是问题，第一个问题就是美国有那么多研发产品，但是实际上生产的是弄到亚洲去生产，就是最后弄到美国没法控制了，没法控制了。而再一个，还有一点就是，美国应该有自己的这种“一带一路”的这种方法，不能够就是说你一直在抵制它，你自己没有，就是我们应该有自己的这种“一带一路”的这种发展的这种设计，要不然呢，就说。
80% of all doctoral candidates in electrical engineering and computer science in the U.S. are foreign, most of them Chinese.
就是很多现在就是30%的这种就是大学毕业的这种做研发的技术人员啊，和美国现在只有7%，而且在美国呢有很多的这种科技研发人员其实都是中国的后裔。如果我们不能改变这个，这也是一个问题。其实现在也是呢，就是把中国这些 人才都吸引到美国来了。
Short-term measures can destabilize this Chinese juggernaut. It's going to be difficult and expensive on the scale of the efforts we made to win the Cold War or the missile race with Russia or World War II. It's going to be difficult, but most assuredly we can do it. Thank you very much.
他就讲哈，现在这个主要是现在中国这所有“一带一路”这种状况，就是美国自己要做一些什么，比如说研发人员呀，还有他们自己美国本身没有这种对策，只是把问题找到了，但是怎么样进一步去解决，是值得思考。
His company Geo Investing has itself uncovered some $15 billion worth of such malpractice, and he bills himself and is most welcome here as a champion of free speech, which we are very pleased to be able to exercise on this occasion with his help. Dan, welcome.
So thank you all for having me here. And I find myself saying the same thing I've said for the last 10 years. I have no idea how I got here. It's a crazy story. I am an average person, incredibly average, from an average place, Flint, Michigan, raised with a great working family. And I came across the most wild and crazy story of fraud that you could make up. And so I'm going to tell you the story and tell you who I am, because who I am is who you are. And who I am.
这个人是个墨西哥人，在墨西哥生长。他拍了一个就关于中国的一个电影，叫我不知道中文怎么翻啊 ，Chinese Castle。
Going into November, we were a little crestfallen, and we looked for the greatest opportunity in investing, for the greatest value in investing. And we saw China in 2009, and we went all in. And man, we're talking 80-90% of everything we had was invested in China. And we picked up 229% in 2009. We were rock stars. We knew what we were doing. And then in 2010, some of these evil short sellers started to say some of the companies that we had invested in and exited because it hit a price target that we were comfortable with were frauds. And my partner and I decided right away that A, they were wrong, but we needed to prove they were wrong. Because if they weren't, then we just got lucky. And 2008 was going to happen to us all over again. So we hired researchers to go on the ground in China.
2009年，他有一些调查人员到了那个中国去调查当时的这种就是现在这些在美国这些公司到美国去投资啊，就各种各样的现象，他觉得特别奇怪，他们就跑到美国去，跑到中国去，就是各种各地啊，去进行各种各样调查。他为什么这？
They get on the bus, they leave, the next day, factory shuts down, they're all temporary workers. For any of you that have seen the China Hustle, you saw that
China Hustle 中文怎么说？
time-lapse surveillance camera
是一个电影啊，他拍的。
over and over again. So a nobody from Flint, Michigan had 12 companies delisted from our exchanges and exposed $15 billion in fraud. And that's what all of you can do once you set your mind to it, once you see where it's at. And I will tell you right away that when our researchers came back and said that fraud is out in the open, our first inclination wasn't to be short. I went to the exchanges and I said, this is what's happening. They said, get out of here. Who are you? I went to the investment banks. I said, you should hire us to do your due diligence, because we're obviously better at it than you are. And you're taking 10% transaction fees representing frauds. They said, you want us to pay you not to collect fees? Because if you come back and tell us they're a fraud, we can't collect the fee. Get out of here, we're going to sue you. After being told this enough times, We left, we published our reports, and we started crashing billion-dollar companies. And the investment banks kept their promise. They sued us. Of course. And again, I don't know how I got here, but it starts with a $247 million lawsuit. Now, I don't care how tough you think you are and what you think you've done when you've crashed a billion-dollar company. When a $247 million lawsuit lands on your desk, you get a lump in your throat. It's tough. Thank God it was that much money. If it would have been $10 million, then I had to think about it. But for $247 million, I dug my feet in. And we fought and we won. Why? Because we have something, I have something, as a low-born, average citizen that you don't have in China. Freedom of speech. And we take it to them with the freedom of speech. We go at them with the freedom of speech.
他就是做了很多这种大的公司这种腐败呀，这种调查。他说为什么我在这个什么都不是这么一个人，在美国能够挑战这些大的公司呢？就是因为我跟中国不同，在美国，所以这什么都不是一个平民百姓能调查这些大的这种跨国公司。所以他就拍了一个电影，就揭露这些很多大的公司这种腐败呀，还有中间的这些黑幕。他说他到香港啊，在过去这4年来啊，这香港不再是一国两制了。他说这中国和香港就是一个国家一个制度。
They're 300 miles away from here right now. You can go see what I said and what I showed you on my presentation. He said, no, I can't. So when China wants something from Hong Kong, they remind us we're one country. When Hong Kong wants something on a China-based company, they remind us we're two systems.
他说，如果中国大陆想从香港要什么东西，他会说我们是一个国家；如果香港这些企业想从中国要什么东西，中国就会说我不是，我们是两个制度，两个国家。
And I spoke to Congress, 15 of our representatives in Congress and in the Senate. And I came home, my wife asked me, what did you learn? That many of our members of Congress are really dumb. And that is funny because it is so true. I, as a citizen, go down there and say, look, here's a fact. It's not illegal in China to steal from an American citizen. To this day. And I remember members of Congress are like, what? Oh, okay, I'm telling you this. You're in Congress and you don't know. No, they don't know. They didn't know. And then
就是好多美国的这个议会的人吧，不知道现在就是现实，就是中国到底在做什么呀？他很多他都不知道，他说挺无知的。对，现在就目前到底出现的状况。
How about if you're going to call the market a buyer beware environment? It says on a pack of cigarettes, if you smoke these enough, they'll kill you. How about you put a little asterisk next to the ticker symbol of these companies? You pull it down and say, hey, by the way, if this executive steals all the assets of this company, which they've done hundreds of times now, to the tune of over $100 billion, they're not prosecutable. Just make investors aware. They're not prosecutable if they steal all your money. No, couldn't get that done either. Why? Because China is buying our freedom of speech.
OK， 他就想说，他说如果你买一包烟哈，烟上会跟你说你抽烟就会死。他说如果现在为什么美国这种政府不给这些就是美国这些投资人员说你要是去了中国你就会你就会受到一些你的经济上会受到损失，为什么不警告我们这些投资人员？他说的不是，就是议会呢就不同意他这种看法。他说为什么呢？就是因为美国已经把他们这种言论自由啊，以及这个已经给买下来了。
China. I don't have anything against China. I have something against companies that lie, cheat, and steal. And I point this out.
他说我个人来讲不反对中国，我反对什么呢？就是反对那些中国那些公司去偷窃别人的
by us. Our banks, our institutions. So my problem isn't with China or the Chinese.
他说问题不是
American institutions
不是对中国或者对中国人民，而是对就是
that are committing fraud. That's not a people problem.
而是这些就是像就美国的一些公司啊，大的这些财团，他们在共同的这种欺骗，他们这些人需要做一些事情，
Here's the
他
culprit.
们这些人要被
It's not in the map.
揭发出来。
Problem is accounting is an art form, and they have some Jackson Pollocks over there. So the culture difference that we do have is that when China is attacked, they see themselves as circular units. Their family is the tightest circle. Their village is an outer circle. Their province is an outer circle of pride. And then their country. They don't have a whistleblower program in China. A whistleblower program is like, you'll hear the whistle blows, the bullet goes through your head. They don't tell on each other. So they have that circular, tight-knit group. When they circle their wagons, they're tough. The United States used to be that way. But now, when we circle our wagons, we're here, they're there, they throw a bag of money in the middle, our wagons break.
他说以前就是中国哈，其实是一个非常就是自我保护这么一个小的团体。你有人就是去揭秘啊、解密啊、去暴露啊，但是就揭这个中国的黑暗，他们自己保护自己，就像一个自己一个村子一个省似的哈。说其实美国以前也是这样，就自我保护，但是现在呢，就中国呢扔过一袋子钱来。那美国的系统就整个被买掉了，就是不再是自我保护了，所以现在就是这个问题。中国还是在自我保护，就没有人能揭秘，团自我保护。美国呢就已经被打破了，被腐蚀了吧。
Subsequently, he has played a major role at the national political level, notably as the chairman of Breitbart, and subsequently as the chairman of the Trump 2016 campaign, and subsequent to that as the strategic advisor to President Trump in the White House. He needs no further introduction other than to say a great welcome to Steve Bannon.
班农，下一个讲话。
One of the first things I want to do is get our nomenclature, our vernacular, correct. The most important audience we have here today is not the illustrious folks from Wall Street, our financial community, the national security folks who have joined us. It's not the people at CNBC and Yahoo Finance, all the great.
就是今天这里边有 CNBC， 有雅虎，有些就是那个经济的大的媒体、大的财团在这儿，但是我们现在这个讲话不是跟这些人，我们这里边现在有郭文贵在这里面。现在那个郭媒体呢，就把这个在中国在直播，就是最主要的我们的观众今天是中国人民。就是今天我们讲，就不是在反对中国人民，而是我们想帮助中国人民。我们的敌人今天是 CCP 极少的一部分人，在中国，他把
these two systems, the system and Brother Goldman talked about it, or Gordon talked about it, about the Westphalian system. These two systems are not mutually compatible. They can't both survive. We have a global house divided.
现在就是全世界有两个系统，一个是 CCP， 一个是西方。这两个系统呢，不能够同时共存共生。
Terrific, hardworking people of China.
就所有
All 100 names.
老百姓
Chinese society. They have been enslaved.
辛辛苦苦的被奴役的中国人，被这几个王岐山和习近平这几个小小的人奴役着。他们这些人呢，其实是拿着这一方的这种资本主义的制度来维持着他们自己的，维持他们自己。
The most shocking thing today, and I'm going to keep this short because I want Q&A to have people like Roger Robinson and Kyle Bass, Dan David, Gordon Chang, Brother Goldman, and others to be able to answer your questions. The most shocking thing today, even when we drill down on all the different aspects of this, the most shocking thing today is that this happened in April of 2019. History is going to judge us. We are going to be weighed and measured by what happened.
2019年4月是
The same scam's been being run. Same scam's being run. Brother Robinson knows this. Frank Gaffney knows this. Committee on the Present Danger. Why was it set up? Because it kind of took our eye off the ball with the great threat we had in the 60s and the 70s, and that was the Soviet Union. Remember what we were told then. We were told then they're the rising power. We're the declining power.
他就讲2019年4月是一个非常重要的一个日子，就是这个中国当前危险委员会成立了，就是现在就是我们把中国的这个危险提到了前线。就是当初在苏联解体的时候，我们意识到同样的问题，就是苏联是一个上升的一个力量，西方呢有一点。西方美国有点衰落。
One of the reasons I got the inspiration to sit down with Frank Gaffney and talk about reforming the Committee on the Present Danger, because what Bill Casey and Andy Marshall said back in the 70s is, hey, let's look at the map. And guess what? The CIA and other people were wrong. Their economy was only half the size we thought they were.
就是当时苏联就美国跟苏联冷战的时候打仗，什么星球大战那些时候呢，当时呢就是有几个美国非常明智的人，就说去看一看苏联当时实际的经济，他们是在夸张自己的经济，他们的经济其实还没有比他们还没有到他们一半所宣传的那么大。就现在目前来讲，中国其实就是这种状况。那意思就是说，中国现在就是虚吹自己多么多么，其实它的经济不是像它吹嘘的这么好，也是在就是貌似非常强大。
It's the Westphalian system that works. It's freedom that works. What better example do you need than Hong Kong and Taiwan and what the Chinese Americans have done in the United States of America?You give them freedom. You give them freedom.
说看看哈，说如果你要是给中国人民，比如香港、台湾，你给他们自由、人权，让他们能够言论自由，你看看他们能给自己，中国人自己能做什么？看看中国人在美国他们能成就的事情。如果你给他们这种言论自由和人权，他们能实现很大的，能够有伟大的那种成就。
People like Roger Robinson and Kyle Bass and others are bringing up. You don't think this math is not known by people in the city of London? You think this math?
这么多人，包括什么华尔街，包括伦敦股票、伦敦这个经济这些人，他们都知道这个具体的中国目前的经济状况，但是他们就是不说。还有就是只是极少数人，像 Kyle Bass 这些人去把这些真话讲出来。
Davos. He was hailed as a conquering hero, the guy that was going to save globalism. Gave a speech, cover the Economist, cover the Financial Times, right? This was the hero.
习近平在达沃斯讲话的时候，被所有西方的那些大媒体吹嘘他是什么一个拯救全球化的一个英雄啊。被所有那些大的这些财团、大的银行、大的律师行都认为 习近平是这个就是全球化的这个救世主，你以为他们这些大的财团真的不知道事实是什么？当然他们知道，因为他们所以视而不见，就是因为钱。可是历史会评判一切，你们现在决定你们是要站在历史的正义的一边，还是另外一边？
The key part was not American carnage, it was the litany of what he had talked about American decline. And finished on the line, now comes the hour of action. It is Donald Trump that has completely reversed the field and now has engaged China, really, in what I think is not a trade deal, beginning of an armistice, because it's a war.
现在川普把这个形势转变了，他说现在这个不是关于经济，是一场战争，是一个超限战，就像这书写的这样，是一个不光是经济问题。这本书里呀，是1999年由中国作家写的，就写的非常清楚，他们要做什么。说现在你有经济战、信息战和经济战、信息战。他们中国政府知道怎么去打这场战，信息战、经济战是一场经济战争。在过去20年，这个经济战跟中国跟西方已经打了20年了，是现在就是靠川普把这件事情提出来，而且开始改变了美国的这个政策，现在正视这个现实。
We ought to start playing hardball. We ought to start playing smash mouth.
他说：“我同意刚才一个讲话说的，我们现在应该从这个贸易战中走出来，彻底停这个贸易战。”
Why do you think world media today has to try to pierce the firewall? A firewall we should understand that's built not just by American and Western technology, but also by Western and American.
他说：“现在你们看，为什么这个郭文贵一定要把这个防火墙打败？方的技术建了用西方的技术建了这个防火墙，叫这个墙啊，把自己的人，把他们中国人自己给关起来了。”
Made in China 2025 is not to be talked about. I don't think it's had a mention in the Chinese media in 9 months. Right? They're trying to pull back from any relationship at all with Huawei with the PLA. Huawei is the PLA.
他讲就是说，华为就是一个军企。
Senior executives of Huawei don't like me saying that. Then bring it. You are. I would love to have discovery in this one. You are the People's Liberation Army.
就是华为的这个领导层不喜欢我说这个事儿，他说，但是你可以继续跟我叫板，你就是中国人民解放军。
It's our system. If we acted as fiduciaries, the underpinning of the entire financial system. Why are our capital markets so robust? It's about our fiduciary responsibility. Here is why Trump and here's why the deplorables are so angry. Here's why they elected Donald Trump. They understand the factories got shipped to China. They understand.
这也就是为什么川普被选的原因，因为这些所有选他的人意识到，他们的工厂被挪到了中国。 所以现在这个关税其实就是想把所有这些产业带回美国。
This is a Greek tragedy. The greatest power on earth, the working people that are the backbone of it.
就是美国呢，用这些退休基金啊、福利基金啊，去资助这个中国的这些大的这些公司，所以这个是个问题。
South China Sea then that we were hunting for carrier battle groups to protect and hunting for Soviet submarines, never ever envisioning that an American government would look the other way when stationary aircraft carriers essentially were built to take away the freedom of navigation and the lifeline to our allies in Taiwan, in South Korea, in Japan. I want to wrap with one thing. Joe Biden, Joe, opened his presidential campaign today. America's an idea. America's not an idea. America's a country. America's a country with a border and a people and a land.
从这个现在那个民主党的竞选人叫 Joe Biden， 他现在要竞选总统啊，他就说他宣传说，美国的理念，他说美国不是个理念，美国是一个国家，是一个有人有边境的一个国家。
Joe's going to add to this. And they talk about what they stand for. And I happened to watch, I don't know if you did, I watched all 5 hours the other night of the CNN town halls. You know what's almost never mentioned? China. This is the greatest existential threat we've ever had.
Joe Biden 就是这个民主党的这个竞选人要参加总统竞选的时候，他讲了5个小时的这个竞选的讲话的时候，他没有提到中国。中国现在是最大的一个威胁，他这个竞选的这个讲话中没有提到中国。
600-ship Navy. I was the special assistant chief of naval operation. It was economic warfare to bury them, as was Star Wars. That's what Roger Robinson did.
把那个谁的音关一下。
He's one of the unknown heroes and not well enough known. He worked on that. That's how he destroyed somebody. And by the way, CIA still got it wrong. It said take 50 years. It took 8. Why? Because what did Reagan say? We win and they lose. And that's what the Committee on Present Danger is. In all of this, and I'm going to...
就是当初那个里根啊打败苏联，其实当时并不是真正的 war， 真正的那个战争，当时也是一种经济的战争。
Mindfulness. And that is not Marianne Williamson. She's running on at least bringing positivity. I might note to the New York Post, by the way, you swapped the picture. This is actually Swalwell. That's Tim Ryan. Your campaign's going poorly when the New York Post gets your picture's wrong. But it's really about Joe. It's not about this group. It's Joe Biden. Joe Biden is going to be in Pennsylvania today.
他才是在讲这个民主党要竞选总统的这个 Joe Biden， 他就讲了半天，其实没有提到最主要的原因，最主要的问题。
Understanding Pennsylvania, Ohio, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota, that upper fortress of the Trump movement, which delivered this stunning victory in 2016, Biden's got to show he can bring that. What he ought to do today is be very truthful to the labor unions up there and to the steel workers. Joe Biden's got to come 100% clean on his relationship and his family's relationship with the CCP. In 2013, on Air Force 2, I think he took his son over there. 10 days later, they signed $1 billion deal for their private hedge fund. We need to know every piece of involvement that Joe Biden has had with the Chinese Communist Party, the Bank of China, and all the financial institutions in China.
Joe Biden 呢，最近就签了一个跟中国就签了一个大的合同。他说现在 Joe Biden 他需要的是说明他跟中国到底是什么关系。
Start to bring the jobs back. Remember, Trump was mocked and ridiculed about when he did the 232 and he did the 301 on technology. He was mocked and ridiculed. This could not happen. It couldn't happen at all. Joe Biden was there for 8 years. We had the Munich of the 21st century was allowing the CCP to build those islands. And what Obama did, he moved one Marine brigade to Darwin, Australia. That's the pivot to Asia. Oh, except she cut the rose garden, look him in the eye, and on no more cyber theft, and doubled down in the next year. Joe Biden has to answer the question. What did you know? When did you know it? And how much money has your family and you personally?
就 Joe Biden，
the most murderous regime of the 21st century.
Joe Biden 就是这个竞选参加这个民主党竞选的这个人，你一定要交代你从中国那儿拿你的人和你家里人从中国那儿拿到了什么好处。
How's that for a clean better? Well done. Don't go away. I want all of our speakers to come up and we'll take your questions. If you will do me a favor and then identify yourselves. If you are with an organization, want to identify that, please do that as well. And if you have a specific person you'd like the question answered by, identify them as well. So Kyle and David and Gordon and Steve and Roger, come on up. And Dan. Are there questions? Yes, there are.
现在是问答阶段。
Let's get a mic to you so that people can hear what you have to say. Go ahead. Identify yourself.
Jeff Weisenfeld, and any of those Center for Security Policy. Any of those of you who are most familiar with the capital markets in your presentation, as you may know, China shares on the exchange are now available for sale to investors here. What is the likelihood that there are a goodly number of those companies which have Potemkin villages and many of the other characteristics that have been described this morning that could ultimately cause investors here a real problem?
Question for anybody.
We have not, frankly, in our shop, been looking at the entire spectrum of fraud and misdeeds of the type that's been described today. What we are focusing on, and I think I can speak to, are two what I would call material asymmetric risk categories. National security abuses and human rights related abuses.
就现在我们看的呢，一个是国家安全，一个是人权问题，这两个方面是我们现在目前最针对的事情。
Some illustrations of the fact that there is precious little, if any, due diligence being performed. What are decidedly material risk categories here? Now, that's evident when you look at the presence of companies with the kinds of profiles that I was talking about, including the hike visions vis-a-vis concentration camps in Xinjiang. You know, this is not what the American people had in mind. And I would only turn it over to others to talk to the issue, to other glaring problems. And hopefully those are being detected as well. But I can tell you where there is a glaring blind spot here, and that's in these two categories.
就现在最明显的问题啊，就是我们一定要马上针对就是人权和国家安全问题。
You know, today, the Chinese companies that list, if an ADR lists in the U.S., there's a level 1, level 2, level 3 ADR. Those all have different listing requirements. So today, someone like a Chinese bank can actually raise money in the U.S. market by selling shares, and all they have to send us is a 15-page picture-filled glossy annual report, no financials, no audit.
就现在在美国上市的很多这种中国上市公司吧，到目前为止没有任何透明的资料，只是写一些他公司的简介。 他们这些人在美国呢，去融资啊，去发行股票啊，债券呀，但是美国没有任何的透明的资料对这些公司。可是现在呢，就是这个美国的这个美国的这个监管吧，就是这些股票监管的这机关吧，就应该去进行对这些在美国上市的这些大的公司进行调查，去调查他们的这些具体的经济的实力，进行进一步调查，这样才是需要做的。因为很多目前为止他们都没有任何对他们这个进行调查。
Binary kind of system where you don't go to jail for fraud, but you can make money for committing it, they're going to continue to commit fraud. There are several multi-billion-dollar major IPO, ADR frauds listed on our exchange, and they will be coming to a short sellers report near you soon.
John, did you have a question? John Katsimitis?
We have a lot of smart people on boards.
就是他发生那个任何就是有这些欺骗行为，如果没有人负法律责任进监狱啊，他们会继续欺骗。
Today for this quarter, and I know Wall Street and the companies are, what are we going to make this quarter versus what are we going to make over the next 2-3 years?
I used to run fixed income research at Bank of America. Credit strategies at Credit Suisse. The problem is that the U.S.-China economic relationship is to a great extent the construct of American companies. America's best performing companies in terms of market cap, big tech, are largely software companies with by cheap Asian electronics. So it's in the interest of the Facebooks and the Googles and so forth to keep the current arrangement where Asia dumps, particularly China, very large amounts of cheap smartphones and computers and tablets on us while they make the money on the software. Because hardware production is subsidized in Asia, Americans have gotten out of the business. As a matter of fact, there's the
可是现在的问题哈就是很多美国的这些大的公司财团，比如好像 Google 还有 Facebook， 他们赚钱是用软件赚钱，但是同时呢，让这些在亚洲的这些公司，包括中国，他们用这种硬件、手机啊这种，把所有这种美国的这些工作呀，这种生产线呢，他们从中亚洲、中国在这方面得到了利益。
You tell me what it will take to put that stuff in brick and mortar and silicon and so forth before I find a way to tax it away from you. That's what I think it will take. Take the president to get down and dirty with him.
就是他说要对这些大的财团，包括 Google 啊这些，就是用他们挣了钱了，就是在软件上，但是同时呢，又让这些硬件在欧洲这些，就是在亚洲的这些用。就如果这个人讲哈，说如果美国不做一些行为哈，就跟好像当初那个911的事件到那时候发展到那个程度就已经太晚了。
Some of those have gotten to the point where almost Americans have died. That's what it's going to take.
可现在其实已经很严重了，就是我们的这些军舰呀、什么的被中国这些在海上被袭击呀、其实就是美国这些大的财团和这些经济财团是为这个在为中共做说客，一直这是一个非常明确的问题。就是所有这些大的财团、大的这些公司，他们是在为这些中共的这些少数的人在洗地，在做说客。
Forced technology transfers in
and the subsidies of state-owned industries. Because remember, China's greatest export, the CCP's greatest export, is deflation and overcapacity. The reason Japanese industrial production can't get up, Western Europe, the United States, there's so much overcapacity financed by the West that the Chinese have. These people are unregistered foreign agents. And I would respectfully submit, if Paul Manafort and Mike Flynn and others on the Russia hoax investigation of President Trump about a nation that is smaller than the economy of New York State and a demographic death spiral that has no technology, they should look at who are the foreign agent representatives unregistered on Wall Street in corporate America that every day bomb office with you have to sign a deal.
他说我们现在要看那些谁在这些就是在西方的这些没有名字的这些为中国人说话的这些人，这些所谓有特殊背景的人，这些人在干什么？他们是在为中国做什么？防火墙，还有就是被奴役的中国人，他们受到影响。
Hold people like Biden accountable, and eventually get the law enforcement apparatus of the Justice Department to look into this.
美国这些法律部门呀，这些法官呐、法院应该去调查这些人，这些在西方的，就是有这种特殊使命的，为中国人，就中共政府洗地呀、做说客这些人，应该对这些人进行调查。
That's who they report to, profit-driven, as they should be. That's capitalism. But the fact that they're American is incidental, and probably because they need the protection of the United States. But they're beholden to their shareholders, and if that's coming out of China, which it is, they're going to be a political arm for China, and have been.
I would only add that there is a huge disconnect here between fund managers and average Americans who have portfolios. Nobody knows what's in their pension systems. I mean, I certainly don't. In other words, it's a long list of companies.
他说现在美国的问题啊，是说这些管理这些好像退休金呐、这些大的这些股票的这些人员和这些美国的平民百姓，他们之间呢也有不同的认知。这些人呢，就是管理这些财团的这些人呢，他们只管自己的这些股票的价值啊，而没有去考虑到每个美国平民把他们自己的退休金加进了这些系统里面，他们不知道。他们的钱用在什么地方呢？他们的钱是用在给那些中国做监控啊，就是关起来那些新疆的人呢，建这个防火墙。平民百姓，美国的这些平民百姓把自己那些很多的这些退休金啊、这些保险金啊加入这些的财团，其实这些大的公司呢，就用这些钱呢去帮助这些中共建立这些，又是建防火墙，又是建这个集中营。
Emerging market index. Are they going to be next in the Bloomberg Barclays aggregate bond fund? In other words, it's also moving strongly into Chinese mainland companies. Who are these folks? These are the questions we need to be asking because it's our money. And just to close on one last point that I didn't make, which is the pace of Chinese funds in our market. These indexes, the funds, are the greatest discovery Beijing could have ever made. I mean, they are one-stop shopping because they send instantly into every cell of the American body politic. And if you have this pace continue of trillions of dollars of funds moving into American investment portfolios, you could wake up 2 or 3 years from now and realize that 17% or 22% of your retirement system is in Chinese securities.
他说：“你看哈，就是现在有一
Then you would have taken today's China lobby and made that seem like tinker toys, because you'd have a lobby of well over 100 million Americans. I don't know how many Americans are in the market, but I suspect it gets up more like 200. The point is that if you want to see a lobby, if you want to see the definition of checkmate,
就是美国平民应该知道他们的钱用在什么地方。”
penalties of any kind for China around the world is going to result in a devaluation of their.
voices are heard and lighthouses allowed to get this deal. It's one of the reasons I believe that Prime Minister Abe is coming on a short trip and a turnaround this weekend in the White House. Not just with the Japanese deal. I think it's to raise the alarm about what a non-structural deal with China could hold.
就是安倍下星期要访美，不光是要跟美国谈什么他们之间中日之间的问题，而是要整个谈谈中国跟美国贸易谈判方面的全局的这么一个谈判。
Radical export controls that prevent Boeing from selling satellites to China, as the Wall Street Journal reported earlier this week that he used for surveillance, preventing Intel from creating a research center in China which advances Chinese skills and so forth. So I think putting our own house in order would be an urgent thing to do. In terms of large tariffs, we've got to see more. Our biggest imports from China are smartphones, computers, tablets, and so forth. If we put on huge tariffs across the board, Americans will start paying a lot more for those products, and in that case, there might be a reaction. President Trump might not be reelected. So I agree with Steve. This is an armistice. We're not going to win everything in this round. We have to gauge profit and loss, benefit and cost, and move on to the strategically decisive things which are going to win the long war.
这个人讲哈，他说我们其实现在是要把在美国政府方面调整我们的步伐，调整我们的政策，因为你一味的加关税，加多少只能是伤害美国平民百姓。比如什么你的手机呀、各种各样电器，现在美国已经自己不生产了。这样的话，加关税其实不起到任何作用，只能伤害美国平民百姓。所以最主要的是改变我们的政策。
Reserve currency of the world, which would be very bad for us.
You can't turn your currency into reserve currency. Would you put your checking account in the RMB? You know, I wouldn't. Everyone wants it in dollars, including the Chinese. Now, the Chinese are going to bribe our financial industry by giving them big franchises in China. UBS has already gotten a bank license. Allianz Insurance has already gotten an insurance license. JP Morgan will definitely be in there. All of the investment companies, BlackRock will be in there. And at that point, they hope over perhaps 10 years to develop a capital market sufficiently integrated with the West that would allow them to develop a reserve currency. So, you know, we should be careful about what we wish for. There are some aspects of Chinese transparency which act as a bribe to our corporate sector and advance their own agenda long term.
I'd like to add something to that. When you look at the money supply in China, if you look at Chinese M2 at the end of last year hit I'm going to use dollars, hit $32 trillion on an economy of 12. Okay, they've printed more money than anyone ever has. Think about the U.S. debate is whether or not the Fed's balance sheet is incredibly too large. It's somewhere between 3 and 3.5 trillion. The Chinese have printed $32 trillion worth of their currency domestically, and they've held the price levels down on everything but real estate. And so, look, if they ever open their capital account, you know, I don't know how many rich Chinese people you know that can't wait to buy more Chinese real estate and send their kids to school in China. But what's going to happen is the currency would immediately suffer a massive devaluation. So this idea of somehow finding 30, first of all, the amount of gold ever mined in world.
现在就是中国印钱，就是它已经非常严重了，而且同时呢，中国政府呢就把这个房地产呀这个价值呢还是在往下压。如果你要想让它打开这个金融经济市场吧，就会造成巨大的这个所有的这种货币贬值。这个是一个，就是说小心你这个我们要特别小心这个后果。你比如想让中国的这些就外国这些银行进到中国去开放市场，但是最后就是让它这些货币呀能够正常流通，但是因为中国现在非常不正常，如果真要是走到了这种就是按轨道怎么走的话呢，中国的这个就是会有巨大的这种通货膨胀。
In Southeast Asia and elsewhere in the world, Japan has more foreign assets than China does. And they certainly have the capacity to export technology. If we united with them, India and other countries, to create our own Belt and Road Initiative and pursue it seriously, I think we could chop up China's efforts in most of the world. We could do it much more effectively, particularly Southeast Asia, which is China's backyard and doesn't like doing business with the Chinese because they know them. So I think the answer is the Japanese have looked at us prevaricate, pivot to Asia, as Steve was saying, that's one Marine Brigade in Darwin, Australia, and wondering whether we're serious enough about it. They've got to live next to China.
他讲说比如在印度、在日本也有很多外国投资在里边，不比中国少。但是他们呢，也可以就像印度啊、日本呢，他们同样可以有这种“一带一路”的这种经济政策，就是这种计划。但是呢，他们就日本呢，就是在看美国、看西方对这个事情是不是能够把它这个中国的这个“一带一路”的这种政策呢，能够解体，大家就联合起来吧，把它一段一段的给它支离开。然后呢，这是一种全球的一个动作。
Japanese stock exchange. I think the last count was 4, compared to our over 650. In part because that's the rigor of their disclosure requirements, the rigor of what it takes to get onto their market, versus the free lunch program that largely exists here, particularly in the OTC, the over-the-counter market. So this business about risk and disclosure and transparency is essential. The Japanese fully appreciate the granularity of much of what I was talking about today. They're looking at troubled Chinese transactions around the world. Those Belt and Road Initiative projects that never came to fruition, had safety problems, quality control, not just corruption and human rights implications, but all manner of problems that have ensued. They are competing with a rigged system, but through exposing the Chinese for what they're really up to, which has been such a powerful theme this morning. So I think the Japanese are further ahead in terms of this kind of scrutiny and demand-oriented performance on the part of China than we are by a good bit. We have a lot to learn from them. But one thing for sure is they are at our side, particularly with Prime Minister Abe. I don't see any daylight between Japan and...
他说日本在美国只有4家上市公司，150家相比哈，就是日本，就这是一个状况。刚才这个谁的麦克风特别小，没听清楚。
David Braunschweig, I have one word and 2 questions. The one word that I haven't heard much today is Taiwan. The 2 questions are, what is the likelihood and the timing of China enacting its one country, 2 systems with China, meaning with Taiwan, meaning invading?
他说有一个词2个问题，第一个问题是第一个词没有人提是台湾，第一个问题就是中国有多大可能去征服台湾，第二个是美国要做什么。
We've drawn our Western defense perimeter not off of California or even Guam, but off the coast of Asia. Xi Jinping has been talking with increasing frequency about.
习近平最近呢，一直在台湾可能用武力征服台湾，就越来越说这种声音越来越大。
But nonetheless, as you see internal distress inside of China, the idea of taking over Taiwan by force if necessary becomes much more attractive to Xi Jinping, who is in a political position where he's put himself in a point where he's in jeopardy because he has deinstitutionalized the Communist Party, created a lot of enemies. And so misadventure abroad actually makes quite some...
就是习近平啊，在国内有很大压力，他把很多人关起来，政治上受到很大压力，他可能会用这个就是征服台湾、武力征服台湾的，去刺激他的这个领导力。
That's always been very difficult for others to understand. Dean Acheson in 1950 put South Korea outside of the U.S. defense perimeter. And what did we do?
We defended it, despite what he said.
他说美国要怎么做呢？就像1950年，这个就是朝鲜战争似的。当时美国去了朝鲜，去了打仗，而且去了后来中东。当时我就科威特打仗也是在去参加了这个中东战争，也是在保护科威特。就如果美国要是被逼到了那个程度呢，我们也会我们如果说习近平一意孤行，要是用武力怎么样的话，美国也会去干预，武力干预。
Election season, before we even get to Iowa, we start with, I think, a more important election. That's Taiwan. And just of was it Kaohsiung Han, who has very close relationships with the CCP, dropped out, I think, yesterday for the KMT primary because Terry Guo of Foxconn, is now running. He got inspired by the goddess Mazu last week.
他在讲这个郭台铭要竞选台湾总统。
Or William Lay, one of the two candidates of the DPP, but the DPP is all about independence, all about a relationship and partnership with the United States. And I think we have to ask the question, just like we have to ask Joe Biden and his family, what is your relationship with Chinese financial institutions? What is your relationship with senior members of the CCP? What were you doing in 2013 on Air Force 2 with your son? At the same time, you were allowing, as Vice President of the United States, China to build these islands, these stationary aircraft in the South China Sea, and basically had the biggest.
就现在这个竞选台湾，一个是想让台湾的，就相对来讲就是跟美国合作，另外一个呢就是跟这个郭台铭这个跟中共合作，所以现在这是一个问题。现在这个 Joe Biden 就刚才我讲竞选总统的这个人哈，在美国，他就说他跟这个中国有这种千丝万缕，他的家和家庭吧跟这个中共有特别大的联系，所以这个是一个挺大的，目前是一个问题。
And this campaign in 2020 for the presidency of Taiwan is going to be the kickoff to the presidential campaign of 2020 in the United States, because China, and the issue of China and the West, in particular the relationship of the United States and China, to me, is going to be the single most important topic that's discussed. Not wellness, not mindfulness, not all these things that the Democrats are talking about today, but the hard reality of geopolitics.
台湾这个竞选是一个就是物理政治上面一个非常大的一个问题，因为就是下一步将会怎么办？这个是就是手牵手和美国2020这个美国总统竞选是紧密相连的。下一步谁会被当选，是会影响这个地缘政治的一个非常重要的一个现实问题。
Consumer of Wall Street research on China, it often struck me you'd get a research from 4 or 5 banks saying the exact same thing each morning. The chief China economist of all the big global banks is called into the PBOC once a quarter, and they are literally giving talking points. So investor relations is a nice way to put it. They're quite literally an extension of the Chinese propaganda effort. And my question would be on that one is, where's the SEC on this? Very refreshing to hear the commentary on the MSCI and Bloomberg Barclays bond index, which is even bigger. This index inclusion, this sounds like a bit of esoterica, but this is actually a really critical strategy for China to survive the next 3 or 4 years. China is desperate for dollars. As Mr. Bass has mentioned, the Chinese populace is just lined up to get money out of China. Every dollar that comes in, someone's ready to take it down and get it out. So, you're talking hundreds of billions of dollars being forced into China, into markets that, because of the fact that Chinese people cannot get out, are by definition overvalued and at a disequilibrium. So where are the pension regulators and others who are supposed to be...
他讲现在就是这个关于这个美国这个股市啊，还有这个非常重要，他们要起的作用，因为这个刚才讲嘛， 国公民的心呢，都是在中国很多公司里面有投资哈。现在中国有很多这种所谓的精英，把他们自己的这个美金啊全部拿到海外去，但是中国呢，同时又非常非常缺少这个美元。
Your question is perfect. When you look at across the Wall Street banks and you look at the joint ventures that even the U.S. banks have with the Asian banks, the figureheads atop of those JVs are all members of the Chinese Communist Party. There should be some Reg FD disclosure out there, just like there is on analysts owning something. You know, if you're going to read a piece of research, it should say, you know, the vice chairman of the bank is a member of the CCP, and he actually edited.
可是你现在看很多这种国外的西方、美国的这些大的财团呢，他们很多这种领导阶层，很多都是中国这种中共的这个领导人的后代。
This is the real deficit. This is the augmented deficit. I said, well, why don't you put that in your report? They were printed in the report. I said, but you are Bank XYZ here in the United States. Says, yeah, but our chairman in Asia is a CCP member, and it wouldn't make it through the edit. And it literally happens all the time. So I think Reg FD disclosures about Communist Party membership are absolutely necessary.
其实就是刚才讲，就是说这个美国要进行这种调查，就调查这些大的财团呀、大的这种就是金融财团，他们到底里面有多少是中国这种中共的这些能够染指的在里面，这些一定要公布出来，进一步调。
I guess comment something that is also missing from the trade talks is on the human rights side. In China, and probably something that the US should have a interest in. The second observation is how we invest as passive investors, through our 401k does mean that right now money is just flowing exactly where these indices say, but it also means there's a great opportunity in this where people do have, it would be quite easy to have control over where your pension money does go. I did some work with organization called Just Capital here in the US. Now they rank US corporations by ethical standards, and there's a variety of them. And it's so far it's actually pretty unfortunately it's pretty unsuccessful. People don't seem to care how ethical where their money's going. And I was just wondering what organizations you feel are educating investors about the human rights atrocities that happen.
就现在中国啊，没有人权，很多这种人权会非常问题非常严重哈，但是呢，现在很多这种投资银行啊、金融财团呢，他们就借这种中国650家在美国上市公司投入这种里面，然后这个美金呢又投到中国这个公司流到中国，就是说美国政府应该对这个道德伦理这种投资方面应该有什么具体的行为和限制？对这种投资。
Talking about the concentration camps and what's happening to his people, but also making the broader point that there is a war on faith being mounted by the Chinese Communist Party. We will also be discussing a number of issues that we just didn't get to today, including what the Chinese are doing in space.
今天我们来不及讲的呢，就是这个星球这个航空这种战争啊，就是竞争方面，在中国是怎么在这个太空上面进行这种竞争？今天来不及讲。
On the second, we've talked about the South China Sea, the issue of 5G. I had hoped.
今天我们讲了 5G， 讲了这个中国南海的问题，讲了这个。
Make no mistake about it.
我们接下来会继续讲关于在一个太空上面的这种竞争。但是我们必须要面对现在我们面临的这个巨大的中国的造成的威胁。
Internet of things to actually your personal safety. God help us if that's in the hands of the Chinese.
我们一定要关注，因为这是关系到我们自己的个人的这种信息安全。如果中共掌握了这些个人信息，每个人都会面临这样的危险。
As a resource, we will try to keep you enterprise. We're interested in the sorts of things that might help you make better decisions about what you're doing. Specifically,
就是我们这些会议啊，这些研讨啊，都会帮助你拿到更多的，给你每个人提供更多的信息，让你决定你将来下一步将会怎么做。
Technology transfers, willing and unwilling, that must stop. And so must we. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you to this great panel.
结束了，小皮匠。